But what about, like, thinking about the person who bullied you at school, or the person, like, that you went on 2 dates with and then they ghosted you? People that, like, kind of fuck you up. Those people have an impact too.
Flynn's Arcade.
Hi, this is Flynn's Arcade, and this is part 2 of my Scott Pilgrim video. Please like, share and subscribe. So now I'm going to talk about Scott's relationship with Ramona Flowers, and to see if there's anything particularly problematic and if there's any poor messaging involved with that. Like Ramona, she's the reason why she's considered problematic by some people is that she, in a lot of ways, or at least she did in the film, conforms to the manic pixie dream girl trope. If you don't know what that is, basically to summarise, it's just a female character that comes into a man's life who's going through a difficult time or some sort of funk, and then just sort of sorts it out for him somewhere or another just by being whimsical and exciting. And in a lot of ways, actually, Ramona does completely conform to that. If you look at it just like the bare bones of the character, she shows up from nowhere. She seems to mostly just exist to be Scott's girlfriend. And I can see definitely why people take umbrage with that. However, I think there's a lot more to Ramona than just manic pixie dream girl. I think she's far more well-rounded than that. My reasoning for that is that she's a very strong character. I mean, I feel that she's a good distaff counterpart to Scott, because it's just that they're both crappy and completely different. It manifests in very different ways. I mean, Scott has a tendency to wallow and get paralysed by grief. I mean, when the film first starts, or the story first starts, when we first meet him, he's just coming out of a major depressive episode. He can't remember several months of his life. He doesn't even remember graduating university, and it's just a trauma response to do with envy leaving him. And so he's but one of the sort of real sad things about him is that he can't go to the hairdresser. I mean, that sounds pretty inconsequential, but it was because he got his hair cut, the day that envy dumped him, and now it's given him a weird phobia of the hairdressers. In contrast, actually, hair's quite symbolic in Scott Pilgrim. Like, Ramona's hair is incredibly symbolic. She dyes her hair once a week or once every couple of weeks, and she looks quite different. Initially, I thought that's understandable, because I used to like unusual hair colours, and what actually happens is, because often those sort of weird colours, especially the sort of blues and greens and stuff like that, they really don't last that long, and so you have to redo them every couple of weeks anyway, because they start fading. And so you may as well just change your colour, because you're only going to look like that for a couple of weeks anyway. So you might be purple one week, and then in a couple of other weeks you'll be blue for a bit, and then you might be red for a bit. And I just figured it was something like that was happening, or it was just a practical style choice. But actually thinking about it is Ramona's consistent keep changing appearances. It's all related to a massive character flaw that she's got. What she is everything to do with Ramona is that she does runners all the time. Her whole life is based around doing runners. She's moved to Toronto from New York to get away from something. She's first example of her doing a runner. She's got that Super Mario Star Road that she uses to get about very quickly from place to place. It's an example of doing a runner. She has rollerblades as well, which she wears to do a job like delivering either things for Amazon or Netflix, depending on what you're watching. And so a method of employment is one that enables her to run around constantly. So she's never in the same place for long enough. It's a huge character flaw. So she can't even decide on a hairstyle and keep that. She runs around a lot. She does a runner from Scott in the graphic novel, and goes to stay with her dad because she can't cope, rather than facing up to whatever's going on. And that's why she's got X's all littered all around, because she just keeps doing it. One of the my favourite evil ex based story, as far as Ramona's concerned, is the one with Roxy. I mean, she's almost like a sort of joke character almost in the film, but in the series she's a lot more fleshed out, and I actually feel really sorry for her, because when it comes down to it and you look at what's gone on, Ramona just did the same crap she always does. She just pissed off one day and left poor old Roxy, and then Roxy's spent years and years, like, still stuck in this grief cycle because of that. And I just really like the way the whole thing was addressed in the series, because Ramona going around and making peace with her exes is just such a really I just really like the fact they did that, because it is something that we've all you can't fight hate with more hate. That's not how it works. It's only like, at the risk of sounding like a hippie, you can only fight hate with love. That's the only way of getting rid of it. And so what Ramona ended up doing by making peace with her exes, it meant that that she actually did go around like fixing all these horrible mistakes she's made. And I remember like feeling really sad when Roxy started to cry, and like when they had the fight in the video store. But then she needed that. She needed to tell Ramona what she'd done and how much messed her life up. And so and then she was just so much better as a result. And I was just really happy to see her going along on her merry way, and then humming the Crazy Frog tune. And it was just like, just a massive weight had been lifted off her, and I just really like that. And it's not just in her dealings with her evil exes, or no longer evil exes, they're just exes now, in the anime that I particularly enjoyed, is it was like she really gets a complete character arc, which really, like, she's no longer, if there was ever any doubt about her being a manic pixie dream girl, she really isn't one now, because I just really like the way she told Scott quite at the start of the series that when she was little, she used to like watching Columbo, and then it was just sort of, oh, that's a throwaway joke. I just didn't really think too much about it. But then she ends up doing a detective investigation, and she's got a list of all the suspects, and she's going around investigating them. And I really like that, because it also, on a sort of meta level, it pulled her out of the manic pixie dream girl trope, but she definitely isn't one now. But also just actually from as a piece of character development, because it's really strange that somebody whose whole, like, every fibre of their being is that they're a bolter and they just keep running away from everything. They just keep running and running and running. The fact that she actually finds a project, in the project of looking for Scott, and she sticks with it, and she does a good job. And she also, there's like this story about her going back in time to save the whole relationship. It shows that she's really changed. All the, like, the most crappy thing about her is like her refusal to face up to things, and she's not like that anymore. She's grown up and she's changed, and I just really like that particular arc. And now we can move on to Envy, also known as Natalie, and is definitely my favourite character in the whole series. I absolutely love Envy. She's just so cool. It's like David Bowie went to a 25th birthday party, and a band Clash of Demon Head plays with like Pixies and New Order. She's really cool, and she just looks amazing all the time. Like, she's just like, she's just cool as. So yeah, I love Envy. And the anime as well, like, I always thought of her as being like, whilst she's obviously very well respected within universe, I always thought of her more as a sort of indie musician. And so and that's what I thought was quite funny, that there's always, like, if you know bands and stuff, like, there's always like some bands that go on to be quite successful, and most won't. And I just always thought that, like, Envy's bands, I thought they were like just indie famous, in that like people who are really into music would know who they are, and like people who like to read the music press and stuff like that would know who they were, but then like they weren't household names or anything. But in the anime, she's really cranked up to 11, and she actually, rather than being indie famous, she's kind of like a sort of Lady Gaga figure. She's like this like really like legit celebrity that's that can put on ridiculous shows and stuff. I mean, she even takes over Scott's funeral, which it's just all kinds of awesome. And she really is my favourite character. However, there's obviously some, like, she's not, I don't think of her as a particularly nice person, in fact, but then Is it just because we only really see her through Scott's eyes? I'm not too sure. I mean, as I say, that thing with her, like completely having this sort of personality shift and changing her name and changing all the hobbies, and it looks like she's a completely different person. I think that's just all, like, now more and more I think about it, the more convinced that that's just because the story's told from Scott's perspective, and I don't think she changed that much. I think it was all just cosmetic changes. But the thing is, though, is I do find her quite unsettling to watch. I get the impression that that a lot of Scott's like friends, like they don't really like him that much. I think the people in Sex Bomb just tolerate him because he plays the bass for them. I don't think, I mean, especially at the start of the story, I think that's all he is to them. I think that obviously because he's created a hell of a lot of problems in Kim's life. I mean, she's bitter and twisted, and I don't think any of the other people would care for him a huge amount. And I think and so because of this, he doesn't really get any support when he's going through the really dark time. I mean, also it's the sort of thing in the graphic novel. His parents have gone away to Italy, so the people who perhaps would have been able to notice there was something very seriously wrong with him and be able to help weren't there, so they couldn't do anything. I'm going to come on to this in a bit anyway, but the only person who sort of backs him up quite a bit is Wallace Wells, his flatmate. But yeah, he really is. It really is incredibly sad to see somebody in that condition. And so, and that's it. So whilst I don't blame Envy for him being in that condition, because, she didn't try to make him like that, but her actions did cause that. And so whilst I absolutely love the character in a lot of ways, I also feel very unsettled by her in another way, because I can't help but blame her for what happened to Scott, even though, it's like she didn't do it on purpose, but, like, actions have consequences, and they were really bad. And so, yeah, so actually she's sort of, there is a sort of bit of a terrible message of Envy that she's like everyone else in the story. She's not a great person. She's not a bad person, but she's not great. She's somewhere in the middle, like all of them, and like people generally. We all are. I'm now going to talk about Wallace Wells, and that's Scott's flatmate, roommate, and I thought I decided to include him because whilst you might notice that he has something, all the other people I've spoke about all have something in common, in that they actually were romantically involved with Scott, like Knives and Envy and Ramona. They've all dated him, and whereas Wallace, in a lot, like, technically hasn't, so he doesn't really qualify. On paper, he doesn't really qualify as one of Scott's partners. However, I could build a case that they actually were sort of they're in like a sort of a relationship of sorts. I mean, with a sort of sliding scale of like romantic and platonic. It's very much, mostly it's on the platonic end, but there's definite hints that there is something a bit more romantic going on. Like, the thing with Wallace, I just feel so sorry for him, like, because of the way Scott treats him a lot of the time. It's like he's staying in his house and he's not paying any rent. He's always using, like, Wallace's things, like he doesn't pay his way. He often, he even steals from him. That's the thing, when he stole Wallace's credit card to take Ramona out for sushi. I was just so angry. There's literally no excuse for that. It's like, it's his best friend. He's the only person who actually seems to genuinely like him, along with Knives. And he's treating him, like, really poorly, and I just didn't understand it. And I couldn't, it was kind of moral event horizon stuff with me. Out of all the crappy things Scott's done, I just think it's just so scummy. And I just felt really bad for him. And also, I absolutely love the Wallace Wells character. I just find it really funny. There's a bit when they're in the film where he's played by Kieran Culkin, and he starts heckling like Crash and the boys at the gig, and I just find that so funny, and it's one of my favourite parts of the film. So yeah, he's just great. And so I don't like to see him like these, like, a really nice character getting f***ed around, but we're responsible for how people treat us to an extent, and Wallace could have thrown him out. He could have distanced himself from him. He could have made sure that he hid all his shit so that he couldn't rip him off. These are all things that he could have done, and he's obviously like perfectly intelligent, and he didn't do. So I thought about what exactly is Wallace getting out of the relationship? Why is Scott there, and like why hasn't he chucked him out? And then actually in the series, there's a joke at the start about Wallace being Scott's sugar daddy. And then I thought, oh, holy crap, like, and now it all makes sense. Like, my theory now is that Wallace had a crush on Scott, like, like, probably not a massively overt one, but I think he definitely had one. And also, like Wallace, he's got very good social skills, so he's really good at hooking up with people. He doesn't have a problem, like, meeting partners. But he's unlucky in love. So I mean, there's a pit that it's until he meets Mobile, his partner. I believe it becomes on to become his husband's when when he's 37 in the future. I think that he's kind of lonely in a way, and I think that Scott actually is there, and he sort of he kind of needs him because sort of fill the void that that he wishes he well. And also I liked it when he meets Mobile and there's sparks everywhere, and he said, oh, I didn't know sparks were real. So it wasn't just that he needed a relationship. He didn't even know that he needed a relationship because he wasn't aware of what an actual what love can be and what can be a fulfilling relationship. And so I think that Scott in a way is sort of a bit of an emotional support animal for Wallace. And and that's sort of it makes Wallace a bit less of a victim when you look at it like that. In a lot of ways, in Scott is to Wallace what Knives is to Scott, and I think that's what's going on there. But yeah, he's great character. Absolutely love him. So we're coming to the end of the video now, and I just thought I'd do sum up and go back on what I've been saying, and to figure out whether there is a terrible message in Scott Pilgrim. I've come to the conclusion that there isn't a terrible message in Scott Pilgrim, quite the opposite, in fact. It's just that there's some it represents some very some genuinely terrible situations that a lot of us can identify with, and a lot of the time we really would rather not identify with them. I mean, poor old Knives. I just feel so bad for her. I mean, it's like there's nothing like I think we've all gone through unrequited or semi-requited love. It's something that I think we've all experienced, and it's just the worst feeling in the world. And it's just such a relief, when Stephen Stills explains like what the situation is with Scott. And so whilst it's heartbreaking to see her get crushed like that, she needed to she needed to stop. Just stop. And it's but it's really sad to see. It just feels like quite strange that people need a moral or a message from films. I mean, there's myriad reasons to make artwork, and there's myriad reasons to want to watch artwork. Why does I just hate the tendency, and I don't know if it's a modern tendency or whether people have always been like that, but to just to criticise works of fiction when the characters behave badly or or it's unfair. It's fiction, and we don't live in a fair world. I really wish that stories like Scott Pilgrim didn't need to exist. I wish that we could go through life and no one ever got cheated on, and no one ever got dumped, and no one had age-inappropriate relationships, and no one stole off the flatmate. But these things happen, and art should reflect society if it can. Just so and it. I mean, this is a bit where I have a real sort of like philosophical conundrum about Scott Pilgrim, because I remember learning a while ago that Oprah Winfrey, she ran a book club on her programme, and there's obviously select books, and then everyone would read them, and she could pick and choose which ones, and the ones that were on part of her club, they often became bestsellers. But one criticism I remember, and this absolutely horrified me, that one of the criteria for to be chosen to be part of Oprah's book club was that that she wanted things to be books to have therapeutic value. It was like using reading as therapy. You know, and I just thought that's just ridiculous. It's like, I mean, whilst art can be therapeutic, it's not, it's be all and end all. It's all sorts of things like you might want to just broaden your worldview. I mean, I read a book like a few years ago called One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, and it was about a man who'd been imprisoned in the Gulag in the Soviet Union, and it was absolutely fascinating. I just like, you know, I learned a lot of history. I learned about, it was very easy to read, and you know, I've never been in a gulag, so it was just really interesting to learn. Was there moral in it? Was there any therapy? No, there wasn't. It was just something, well, actually there was quite a few morals about politics and totalitarianism, but they weren't personal morals. And it wasn't therapeutic because it's not an environment that I recognise, but I still found it absolutely fascinating. So art doesn't need to be therapeutic, and I think it's quite a dangerous precedent if you start looking for that and actually using it as therapy, as a sort of your like, you know, your sort of standard methods of appreciating art. But that said, though, is Scott Pilgrim I found incredibly therapeutic. You know, so whilst it's like not like something that I need in art, I you know, like I mentioned it a couple of times, that my whole 20s were dominated by the memory of me, well, you know, standing around at gigs and just feeling like crap watching indie bands, and that was just like my whole, you know, it's just something that kept happening, and it's like, obviously that sort of thing, you don't like dwelling on unpleasant memories. And you know, why I felt like crap, it was always for varying reasons. Sometimes it was just I was tired and I didn't want to be there. Sometimes it's because I had beef with someone or something like that. But you know, I've forgotten about it, and I watched Scott Pilgrim, and it just reminded me, and I got that sort of sinking feeling when I saw Scott and Ramona's reaction to watching the Clash at Demon Head, and you know, and it forced me to face up to you know, like some like parts of my past that I, you know, would have quite happily forgotten about. But you're supposed to deal with things, and the fact I'm even talking about it now on camera to the rest of the world, that, well, you know, it might be therapeutic, it might not be, but it, you know, it awakens something that I felt I perhaps needed to address, and I'm sure other people can, like when they're listening to me, they'll have their own version of that. The characters in Scott Pilgrim are all incredibly flawed people, but it's what makes them human. Humans are flawed. And what I feel, if there is any, and I actually think there is a very strong like moral message at the centre of Scott Pilgrim, and it's all about, like, you know, it considers the impact that we have on other people, and that other people have on us. And that's something that's actually remarkably difficult to you know, to think about, because, you know, if you want to think about your best friends, or, you know, who you still love and you hang out with every other weekend, and, you know, and all the fun times that you've spent with them, that's one thing. But what about, like, you know, thinking about the person who bullied you at school, or the person, like, that you went on 2 dates with and then they ghosted you, you know, people that, like, you know, kind of you up, those people have an impact too. But the really worrying thing is, it's not just, it's the impact you've had on other people. I mean, it's just a horrible thing to think about. I mean, even like using my example of like feeling like crap whilst watching gigs when I was in my 20s, like thinking about it now, I was quite a selfish little in those days. I mean, I probably still am now. But, you know, if I'd have actually maybe, like, the people I had beef with actually weren't that bad. It was just that I was jealous or whatever, and I could get offended easily. Maybe they had a lot on the plate and I didn't care or notice, in the same way as Scott's like mates did in this band. They, you know, he's going through hell and no one notices or cares, because, you know, and that's the bit that's really difficult to think about. Yeah, so it's incredibly difficult to think about that. What have I done? What have you done? What have any of us done that's made everyone other people's lives worse? And how could you have done it differently? And that's what I think Scott Pilgrim manages to do, like really make us aware of that. I really like the sort of new avenue they took in the mini-series, where, you know, people weren't fighting the evil exes and Ramona was going around making peace with them, because I just absolutely love that. You know, I just love it. I mean, it's like, you know, like everyone, you can't ever apologise to your exes and they can't apologise to you. It's something that's, you know, like, it's like, so if you dated somebody 5 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it is, you're different people now. And so it's that thing, it's actually impossible to make peace with people like years and years later, and also you don't know how people felt at the time. I mean, there's sort of, I'm convinced that in a lot of situations that people who think they've done something really bad to someone, the other person actually didn't care, and they'll be like, there's sort of the wrongdoer will spend the rest of their life feeling guilty, and they're feeling guilty about nothing because the victim of whatever crappy thing they did, they were just like, they can barely remember it, and it's not something to pay second thought to. On the flip side of that, I'm sure there's people walking around who really like somebody up, and they just don't know. They're just completely unaware of it. Like, it might be that, that person they ghosted after 2 dates, or the person who they made fun of at school, and they've forgotten it, and that when the person's gone off and the other person's been in therapy for like 5 years and they're barely scratching the surface on this thing they did, and it's something very difficult to think about. It's something, if you really go down that rabbit hole, it is harsh, and I think that's the sort of difficult or the problematic message of Scott Pilgrim. I mean, Scott is I coined the term naïve, which is a portmanteau term, and it's a way of just describing somebody he's not evil, but he's naive and evil. His actions create, they create chaos everywhere. He's managed to fuck up quite a few people's lives, and it's not from trying to fuck them up, it's just because of like a refusal to take action. I mean, the fact that he could have died of heat stroke in the house if Wallace had not phoned him up and told him to get out of there. He just finds it impossible, or he can't even go and get his hair cut at the hairdresser's. He's not evil, but he is naive, and I think that's something that he gets to actually not be like that. I think throughout the course of the story, he's actually starts developing a bit of agency and background, and so and that's really great to see. Yeah, so that's the main message of Scott Pilgrim, is to think about the consequences of our actions, and to think about the consequences others' actions have had on our lives and the way we think about things. I mean, there's a whole things that like a clusterfuck of shitty behaviour towards each other. I mean, just to sort of I made a couple of notes actually, because I won't remember this, but I've got my notes that Ramona hurt Roxy due to just her tendency to run away, and then poor old Roxy's been waiting for this to get resolved for years and years, and and actually Ramona's sort of naive in her own way. Envy hurt Scott because as a byproduct of her going through personal growth, she was changing from like an introverted geek to to a sort of fashionable hipster, and that was what she was doing, and it was, that's her right, but it also managed to nearly destroy him. I mean, the one thing though about that, it's just as a weird little aside, Envy, eventually she doesn't even get to pick her own clothes. I get the impression that she's actually not that happy being a famous celebrity. I mean, with things like, Gideon ends up dressing her up at one point, but she also has a stylist who dresses her up, and she seems to have with mixed opinions about it, and I think that actually, so even though it's for a fashionista, that's really bad, and so so it's not like she's having that great a time of it, but still it's still it weren't cool what she did, but and that's it. But then Scott hurts Knives for because of what's happened with Envy. As a sort of neutral act of morally neutral act of wanting to change hobbies and go from one thing to the other. She actually managed to cause a lot of psychological damage to Scott, and then Scott has gone on to cause quite a lot of psychological damage to Knives. So that is a terrible message of Scott Pilgrim. It's not terrible at all in my opinion. I think it's a very good message, and that's the message, is we should always be aware of that actions have consequences. And just remember that even the most, you don't become paralysed with it, but at least try and think about other people and how, how would they feel, and how would you feel it would happen if it happened to you, and just work that. And so that isn't, it's not a terrible message at all, and if that's at the core of it, and it's just, try and do better, just do better, just don't be a dick to people. And try to at least look at things from their point of view, even if you hate them. I mean, you always run the risk that you might make things worse. Even if you try and do the right thing, you might wind up making things worse in the process. But that's the risk you take, and the thing is, like, it's worth a try. I mean, it's like it'll probably, that's the risk you take, and it'll probably go wrong. But oh well, at least you tried. But let me know in the comments if you've got any ideas. I might end up covering them. I mean, because that's the goal, like, to end up doing a video a week. And so, then some always. I mean, I've got quite a lot of ideas, but if you can help me with them, then that would be really great. So that's the end of my video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, share, and subscribe, and see you in the next video.